Hey guys, welcome back to Dad Lifts Podcast. This is Ryan.
And this is Steven.
And this is Dad Lifts. So our guest for today is Jim McKenzie. Jim is a speaker, author, athletic trainer, and a health advocate, in addition to being a working at-home father of, get this, 7 children. He actually caught, I think, all 7 of them while his wife was giving birth, which is pretty crazy and cool. And he's also a renowned family, children, and parenting counselor, and, of course, a dad's advocate. As the spearhead of top childhood obesity now, with wife Louise, Jim helped to create family health, wellness, and skills courses, which were accredited by the National Heart and Lung Institute. Jim was also an athlete of national standing and is currently very active in trying to promote and improve the nation's family lifestyles and health naturally through healthy eating and exercise. He has also co-authored and published 2 books with wife Louise McKenzie. He has also had a popular following amongst dads nationwide with his magazine Every Little Thing Birth and Beyond 360 at www.birthandbeyondmagazine.com and his blog under that same website called The Fatherhood Biz. Welcome, Jim.
Hey there. Nice to hear you.
So we have Jim McKenzie, as you know, on the line today, and he's the creator of this new and what I think the future of dad conventions is, and I'm going to let him talk about it just a little bit. But we kind of wanted this to be just an open discussion to kind of get our audience, both of our audiences, on the same page as to what both of our ideas are about fatherhood. So what I wanted to do first was kind of let you just give us a rundown of your background and why and how you came across what you're doing now.
All right. Well, at risk of turning it into the All About Me show, here I go. Okay. Well, I'm Jim McKenzie and I have 7 children. They're all home birthed and home court, and they're all mine. And it's not something I thought I'd ever really do, having been a divorce attorney in the past until I met my wife. Children were not on the agenda, but you never know. So here I am 17 years later with my oldest is 6'8", and built like a tank. Yeah, and it's been just an amazing experience, and it's something I feel really strongly about, as you know. Mm-hmm. That I want to share that joy with as many guys as possible and deal with it in a balanced way and improve their relationships with their children and hopefully the mother and there's no such thing as an ideal situation for anybody anymore. The old wicker fence is wicker fence, mum and dad and 2 kids. That's now a very small minority of the population. Exactly. So scrolling forwards quite a number of years, a few years ago, about 5 years ago, in fact, I, having been very financially well off, everything went tumbling down, and I had 5 children at the time, property crash, dodgy mortgages, all that jazz, and I was left stuck in this little town in Sarasota, Florida, with a very rickety rack wooden house. I'm wondering what the heck to do. But, the strongest thing that made me keep moving forward was the fact that I just had a great relationship with my wife and my children. And there have been very dire times of going to the food bank. Ryan knows that, and I'm not looking for the sob story. I've been there and done that. But in all of that, I just realized that I could actually do something that I really felt good about and make life better for others, because I knew through all of this I've come out of this a better man. I'm definitely a better husband. I think my wife's around. And I was definitely and the strongest thing that, again, I want to do is to change the landscape for modern dads, because we all have our own trials and tribulations. And so all of this, there's very few resources for fathers which live in the world. So leading on from that, about 2.5 years ago, my wife and I started an online digital magazine called Every Little Thing Birth and Beyond 360. And we did that online because there was no way we could afford a print publication, and we realized that really the future was trying to deal with the problem at grassroots level, the problem of just, the lack of any parenting resources. And we decided to make it free, and we were down to our last computer, which was on life support, but we managed to pull it off as a Word document each month. And at the beginning, you thought, well, is anyone out there really listening?
We know how that feels.
Yeah. But with Every Little Thing, we decided to make it as inclusive as possible, every different lifestyle, culture, and open up the floor to amazing people across, actually some as far as Australia, who have brought their expertise to the table. And it really started to take off. And we put our heart and soul into it, and we just thought, well, okay, if we keep banging away on the drum and saying, listen, things have changed, we need to have a sensible conversation. We can have fun, but at the same time, we've got to get information out to people who just don't know where to go. And particularly, we discovered dads.
Yes.
Because from the pre-birthing process through to education and teen years, everything is about mum and babies. Everything's about mum and children. And I kept meeting more and more dads who just really thought, well, no, I'm really committed. I'm committed in my relationship. I'm committed to my children. But, whenever it comes to dealing with an odd guy or looking for a problem, who do I ask? And, guys can be, we're not supposed to cry and all this sort of old-fashioned crap that my father used to tell me.
Right.
Yes, we do. It doesn't mean we're weak. It's a strength. And if our children see us do it, they get a better... they just get a better model for their future relationships.
Absolutely.
And so, anyway, I'm doing my party little speech here because I'll probably go on. So blow the bullhorn if.
No, I think that's perfect, and the reason I asked that, I think that everyone, ends up doing what they love, or whenever I run into somebody that's doing something great, there's always a story like that behind it. And I wanted you to tell yours because I think it's important. And it's a lot like my story. And just the same thing. I went out and looked for resources for fathers, and I was just blown away at the stuff that is out there. There's a very small amount, but the stuff that is out there is either, riddled with religion, or it's just plain wrong, or it's just a bunch of dads giving their opinions about things. And that's not what I wanted. I think we deserve better than that.
Absolutely.
So,
and it's not an ego trip or anything. And I was very anxious to avoid that. So when I started the magazine, I really avoided the sort of frustrated Jay Leno type father. Dogs, because. I'm not saying we can have fun.
Right.
What's more important to me is that you reach out to the next person and say, look, I did that wrong. I've got 7 kids now. I can't in any way see that at the beginning. I think the most responsibility I'd have for another creature was a goldfish. And then I got this thing that sort of wiggles and poops and does all this stuff. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And my wife and I, we were talking about it the other day. We were just saying that we... coming from very unsupportive families, and 4 very poor parents, we realised we could do a better job just by adjustment and improvising and communicating and seeing what worked and what didn't. And there's no way, if I was a single dad, I know for a fact I would need support. And if I was a separated dad who only saw my kids once a week, I know I would need support. Now, I can't speak for single dads or divorced dads. I mean, I've got this unusual relationship that I've been with my wife for 18 years, and we haven't had a day apart. We've worked together, raised the children together. I can't say that it works for me, but I can't say that would work for even one other person. I'm not that judgmental. But I do know that what I can do is I can bring the benefit of going through certain experiences and letting other dads who've had different experiences bring that into the conversation. And I've learned a lot from that, So scrolling forward with we called this section "Everything for Dads."
Right.
And initially there were a few sort of the ego type guys, the gurus who came forward, and I just wasn't into it. No disrespect, I believe they're trying to do something good, but it's not my method. And then I found more people who had more heart and who were more communicative, and they started to write for the magazine, get the magazine out there, and then after about a year of that, it had grown so much that in about February, March last year, someone suggested, well, there are a few events for dads. There's no competition or ego involved in this. It was just someone suggested, well, why don't you put on an event for dads? And it inspired me to really sort of push it forward into a convention, and then it's become a hotel and hang out for 5 days and all this sort of stuff, so that they can actually be part of it and to just build on the platform to say, okay, we want to change how reach. I can't even begin in an hour, let alone a day.
Hey, Jim, I don't mean to interrupt you here, but I just want to comment on one thing. I really like that you brought Plaxico Burress on because he's a man that had made a mistake, and he did his time and has a second chance, and that's something that I and you both had. So tell me about that a little bit.
I've never dealt with failure, so I kind of connected with that. I can't imagine, So, on one level you can see that everyone's got a story. Everyone's got to get together and say, okay, we need to change it so that more pet dads are involved, the less this generation, because it's a fact. It's a fact that if dads aren't involved, that's where they're going.
Absolutely.
And 24.5 million dads don't see their kids at all. Not on my watch. And so we want to make people who can make a difference at the top listen and get parental education, get these programs in communities so that mums and dads can learn how to communicate better. And for dads, there may always be deadbeat dads, there are deadbeat mums, but the difference is that deadbeat mums usually have resources to help them.
Absolutely.
So that's what this is all about. If people think it's a political issue, well, they'll just have to deal with the political issue. But as far as I'm concerned, money needs to go to education and families first for a society that's worth living.
Jim, I'm usually not. I'm usually interrupting everybody, but I think your story and your angle is so compelling. One thing that I know motivated Ryan with dad lifts, and I definitely bought into it, was there's so many areas in our lives, both professionally and in the gym, is a big component of dad lifts, the fitness aspect, where we're constantly trying to get better. And obviously, as it sounds like you can attest, and we would attest, financially you can recover from failure. Obviously, yes. you try and avoid it. In the gym, you recover from failure constantly. And in many other aspects, even in relationships with your spouse, you're dealing with another reasonable person. Whereas that's not always true with your kids, certainly as younger kids. And so I think Ryan and my background in terms of saying, gosh, why are we working so hard in all these other areas in our life when the one thing that really matters, being a dad for us, or being a good parent for parents, it's like we're not doing anything there. And rather than just listening to somebody preach, I mean that in a non-religious sense, but think they know everything. You want to be able to, you want to listen to those people. I think you read a book and you hear somebody's angle and you might test it and see if it works for you. But it's really creating the motivated. So our background said we want to create a resource for everybody else to excel on their own, not tell everyone how we did it or if we did it necessarily, and say it's the only right way. So maybe just what was your background that sort of said, gosh, this is. You talked about it a little bit, but this is the path, or this is why I think this makes sense, other than just not finding a resource out there.
Yeah. Well, as I think I alluded to briefly, that I had never even been near a small child before I had my son, and so the trial and error, who to ask for support, was something that I was fortunate with because I had my wife and we communicate very well. She is an extremely giving and patient person. I shouldn't say this within her earshot, I suppose. Oh boy, I'm going to suffer now. Okay, thanks, guys. But the the rationale behind everything I do is that I can cope with falling down, provided I have tried. And part of that trial and error is learning. And the only way you can learn is to reach out to someone else. And what works for me, like I said before, wouldn't necessarily, and I have coached parents and families, and I've taught kids about cooking. This is what really depends on it, because my Louise, my wife, my wife and I, we started doing these courses at the Girls Inc. and Boys and Girls Club for teaching families about how to eat healthily on a budget. I mean, we were a family of 7 at the time, and we had about $25 a day to eat, for food. We did that by cooking from scratch and really reducing it to a basic diet. But in all of those courses, it was always mums. I think we taught hundreds of different people, and there was one dad, apart from me, who turned up. And I thought, well, how American society...
There were other dads. They had the other kids, presumably had fathers. It wasn't a single-family household. You just mean the dads weren't engaged.
They just didn't. They didn't come. The courses were sort of after school or in the evening, and there were always mums and the kids. And one of the things I noticed is that the kids, and one of the things I knew I was getting right, is that the kids really treated me like their dad. They were asking me questions and talking and communicating with the children. Even, there were children as young as 5. And I realized that they didn't have that male connection in their own households, because if they had, the dads would have shown up. They were invited. And having dealt with children on a professional level when I was a lawyer, and then my own children, I realized that, as I say, they just were not used to having a male speak to them. In the sense of just, what they do day to day. Most of them were saying, well, my dad, he comes in and says hi, he might sort of wrestle around a bit, throw a ball, and then that's it. But there was no sort of activity which is like mundane, doing the house cleaning or being in the kitchen with them even, or anything like that. And so I realized that by the fact that I've always been hands-on, that's what I know I've got right, and I know how to communicate that. So following on from what I had found out with dealing with all these children and kids, all I'm saying to other fathers is I have not spent a substantial amount of time away from my children ever. I can't imagine it, and I just have no idea how to tell another dad how to deal with that. So what I decided to do is, let's find someone who does, and who's not going to preach, and who's not going to say, oh, well, the routines you need to follow are X, Y, Z. But someone who's actually going to see, in this situation, there's so many different variables, but let's just get as many as possible together and tell the world about them, and then find people who actually deal with people in a relatable way. And not make them feel bad about themselves, not make them feel that they're, less of a father because of the situation they're in. I mean, Plaxico Perez has been, revered for years and years.
Right.
And he is, basically wanting to share how he dealt with a really unimaginable situation for being a superstar with a sort of $35 million contract to making a mistake and ending up in prison for 2 years. That's what it's about. There's no media outlet for most of them. For example, I've been dealing with the Native American Fathers and Families Association in Arizona. They have been doing amazing work with about 200 tribes, concentrating.
Oh,
wow. Across the country. Can they get funding from Washington? No. I'm helping them to get word out about what they do, and also to try and increase their funding, because they're doing the most amazing work with dads, with nutrition. They've got the same problems as other, I was going to say species. What am I talking about?
Absolutely.
This is America. I mean, I've never seen so many sort of forms trying to describe what people are.
I know.
I'll say people in different situations, because I think we're all multicultural, and the problems may vary according to where we derive from, or how poor we are, but the problems are still the same. But the only people who can teach you how to get out of them are the people who've been through it.
Well, that's why, I think Plaxico Burress is such an interesting example, because we're all pretty familiar with that. And most people sort of have a preconceived idea in their head of professional athletes in general. So, obviously what happened in his life, hopefully in most people, it only happens to a very small degree of that, right? And even if it's to the same extent, it's much less public. So, I guess I'll ask the question, and I don't mean to be interrogating you, but since you're a lawyer, I think you take it, right? How do you respond to people who say, well, that's not relevant to me, because when I mess up, it's, I don't have the media, and I don't have, on one hand, on the negative side, nobody's as critical or putting you under a microscope the same way. On the other side, he might have had resources available to him, either because of his wealth or his fame, that I don't have. So just how do you take it down to everyone else's level?
Yeah, well, this is it, because the principle is still the same. I've had this discussion because, I've met people who have said, I've lost my house. They're earning six-figure incomes, and they've got cars, and, it's like, well, I can't go on holiday, I might have to move into rented. And there I am thinking, hang on a minute, I'm 3 months away from being foreclosed and turfed out on the street. And, I have to run a business, I have to rebuild a business, I cannot get a job, I'm not going to go back to England. My situation is worse than yours. But what I've come to realize, and from being in a situation where I thought, well, what are you moaning about? You've got all the resources in the world, you've got family around you, you've got a job, you've got a car. And I'm thinking my situation is so much worse than yours. But the fact is that back in the day, when I did have a sort of 6,000 square foot house, and I could go on holidays, I thought, well, when things started to go wrong and I lost my first property, I thought, oh no, my credit rating's going. I'll be honest, it's relative. And I'm not saying that, I've had that very same almost criticism of other people, and I've learned not to do it, because, those little falls from grace, which you may think, okay, you can't afford your mansion now, they become, over a period of years, they become just as painful in many ways. My biggest insecurity was that I couldn't put a roof over my family's head. I couldn't afford to.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, until the story is told, you can't realize fear is still the same. It's a question of how you deal with that, and you have to learn how to deal with that. And once you have dealt with it, the fear goes away. I didn't want to tell this story about failing and losing all my money. It's the only thing I've ever really failed at in my life. And I spent a couple of months crying about it, waking up in the morning, not sleeping if I had, or whatever. Right. And I've turned it into my power now, because I can tell the story from both sides. That's my experience. I
think that's a good example of, now to answer my own question. I do that all the time.
Help me.
But it's that you can't take for granted that your situation is so unique or removed from anyone else.
Yeah.
that your situation is so unique or removed. And even, as you mentioned, I was fortunate. I grew up around a lot of other young relatives and family. So being around a baby was not a unique experience to me.
Yeah.
But if I don't share that with other dads, and I just take that for granted, then not that I'm going to teach you or teach another dad how to deal with a baby, but at least be a resource so that if somebody has a question about an infant, I'm happy to answer that question. First, and now being a dad, so my oldest is about to turn 7. So knowing people that have 9-year-olds or 12-year-olds, they take for granted what their 12-year-old does, and I am very curious. How gosh, I can't imagine how much my 7-year-old eats. I can't even fathom how I'm going to feed him when he's 12. Not to mention, I only have 3 other kids for a total of 4, but. The amount of food we already go through, and the youngest one is an infant. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That does become. It was the biggest concern of mine, beyond even the house having no functioning plumbing and all these sort of things. It was the food, which was the scariest thing.
But it seems mundane to some people, but it can be so critical or so helpful just to hear other people that they're going through the same thing or they understand the same thing.
Yeah, I was amazed how many people I met on the way who on the surface seemed to have all their stuff together. And because I was so open about what I'd experienced, they said, oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I lost my house too. And it's like, what? And I would never otherwise have known had I not been honest, and that is empowering. So turning the negative into positive is kind of a mission statement. We're in a very negative situation so far as the view of Americans towards fathers and employers sort of treating fathers equally, and realizing that in fact they will get a more productive population and a much happier generation of young adults if we all pull together and just think we need to get it right now. Right. Because the problems, and again, I always think research, I'm always skeptical about it, but in what's become my job, I spend so much time looking at facts and looking at research and looking at case studies and stories. But really, this what's disturbing is that America is getting it so wrong in the way that they're dealing with children and families right now. The rest of the world tends to follow. And you're dealing to, I call it a sort of potential global parenting apocalypse. It sounds really dramatic, but
it's the truth.
If from what I know is going on in England, the government there has taken steps to say, okay, we need to start dealing, especially with young fathers, and getting them involved and getting them educated and giving them the opportunity to learn skills. Because we talk about teen mums and everything else. Who the heck's talking about teen dads?
Right.
It's the sensationalism just is sickening, because there was someone else involved here, and those kids need a dad, and so there's support for young mums, but there's nothing for young dads, and they're tackling that right now.
I don't mean to cut you off there. I completely agree with that, and now let me kind of change the subject a little bit, not completely, but I wanted to talk about give me an idea of what the agenda for the conference is going to be, because that's kind of the main reason I wanted to talk to you today. Yeah. Is I think based on what you're telling me during this interview, I think the agenda that you might have for this conference is very intriguing to a lot of dads who maybe don't align themselves with other dad groups. So give us a rundown, if you would.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the whole sort of dynamic of the convention is that it's about dads' issues, but it's not solely for dads. So by saying that women are helping to do, and one of the biggest problems is that a lot of women don't know how to introduce the dads into the conversation. The focus is about dads and how they can parent, but it's not an all guys together type of event. We've got midwives coming. We've got women who deal with etiquette and basic manners, which is completely overlooked for dads, as well as how they can teach their children manners. And if you see how the average kid holds a knife and fork now, I would have got a smack round the head. Not that I'm advocating that is necessary, but right. The principle is that, and I've never touched. Ever, how provoked I've been. It's just not the way. But the whole dynamic here is to make parenting inclusive, is to show a way that we can both work together, no matter if a relationship falls apart, that a mum can actually think, okay, I'm confident enough to not just say, okay, you can see your dad at the weekends, he's just a babysitter. Right. I've met enough hands-on dads, I've had enough determined dads who actually say, well, yeah, I really enjoy what I do. And there are dads who are being laid off every day who are suddenly becoming caregivers while the wife brings home the money. They're not, our dads didn't prepare us for that, or my dad didn't prepare me for anything really. But that's another story. Yeah, So the whole dynamic of this is that the speakers are and the people who are participating are saying that we want to teach families how to communicate. That's at the root of the problem. Sure. And I don't know what your experience is with the birthing processes. We've used midwives, probably a dozen over the time, and of them maybe one was remotely sexist. It's about mum and baby. Right. Louise is she's always just involved me in the process. I will always be eternally grateful for that. And I thought, well, we're not the sort of guys now who will be outside the birthing room smoking a cigar. You know what I mean? Exactly. I mean, please, 1959. That was when I was born.
Right.
And what's your okay? So I mean, you've spoken over the last few minutes about teenage moms and dads, or dads who are totally disengaged. But I think there's also an angle and an appeal, and certainly on dad lists, I know this is the case, and I believe from what I've seen, it's your case too. What do you say to dads that are saying, I am engaged. I do show up at my kids' school, and I take my kids to dance class or gymnastics. What would that person get out of the
Well, that person may realize that the it sounds strange to say, but the joy of actually your child calling for you at 4:00 in the morning as opposed to mum, and and they have the nightmare and they want dad. And I say joy obviously because sleep is I haven't had a lot of that in the last 18 years. But the fact of the matter is that nurturing skill is one that, again, I certainly was not taught how to do. Mums tend to have skills passed down by their mothers or their grandmothers, but I say I can't speak for all dads on this, but most of the dads I've met, their dads were there. They may put a roof over our heads. They may have said, okay, go and do your best, and cheered us on when we're playing sports. But who teaches you how to comfort a child at 4:00 in the morning?
Right.
Who gives you an example of that? That is a joy that I really cherish, and it's one I would love other dads to be able to know what to do when the baby is crying and realize that it's a cry for help, and work out what it means, and be able to do that without mum.
And I assume you would invite dads that feel as though they have something to contribute, not just take.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's participation, and the format is fluid at the moment because we're getting people piling in and saying, "Hey, I want to talk here. I want to do about this." We're going to try and get as many different aspects as possible for people who have something to contribute, and get that word out. Because the most important, I always say in terms of, with the magazine, with advertising, say you may have the best product ever made, but no one's ever seen the best product ever made because no one's ever got it on the market. So far as I'm concerned, with fathering, the best skills have not been seen, and I know that just from a year or two of ploughing through and seeing, I find these people doing amazing things like the Native American Association, and finding another guy who's teaching dads how to stay fit and get their wives fit during the pregnancy. He's coming to shoot a documentary there. His name's James Goodlarty from Get Fit for Birth. I didn't know there were guys who were doing that.
That's crazy.
If you don't know about it, you can't enjoy it. And it's an enjoyable thing to know that's happening.
Absolutely.
I can't speak for everybody, but I'm buzzed by the very fact that there's even a possibility that we can keep this in the public eye. And I had a conversation with a lady from the Washington Post yesterday. So we're getting some national attention on it. And again, it's not about me at all. All I am is a hub. And so I want to find the most amazing people. The other thing is like Operation Veterans Promise. I've been in contact with them. They deal with trying to rehabilitate soldiers. What these guys do is they literally go into whatever communities are needed. They'll put houses up for the veterans. They'll deal with all of the dealing with the red tape and to find them jobs. But I was talking to Michael Angeleski, who is the executive director of it, and he's introducing a quadriplegic dad who is bringing his children up, And the other situations is all these dads are coming back from the wars now. A lot of them haven't even seen their kids ever.
Right.
And then there's another 6,000 dads who are not coming back at all. Who's going to help the mums how to create enough of a fatherhood figure for their children?
That's such a good point, because I was, mainly raised by my mother after the age of 10, and there were a lot of things that, she couldn't do or didn't do correctly. It's just not something you have ingrained in you.
Yeah.
So I think there's something for every kind of dad, is what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. And, we're looking for the positive.
Right.
Bring whatever is positive. We know what the negatives are, But this is it's an idea of looking for solutions that we can all actually understand, with a minimum amount of psychobabble.
Right. Well, we're obviously going to share this more again on Dadlift's website and in our newsletter, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of tell our listeners and maybe your listeners where can we find more information about you, your convention, everything.
Thank you. Okay. Well, here with the trailer. Okay. The Everything Dads convention is in Sarasota, Florida on March 15th, 2014. The event is a celebration of a change in 21st century fatherhood. The format of this is to have celebrities into hosting, because the idea is that if people see that it's being supported by celebrities, everyone likes to have fun, but it's education as well as entertainment. It's a one-day event. Sarasota is about 50 miles south of Tampa. In March, it's absolutely beautiful. And the event will be live streamed, so that if you can't afford to come here, basically, and we've been able to reduce the ticket price a little bit because we've got support from the Plaxico Burress Foundation and another donor. So I'm passing that on to anyone who's coming. We've got concession tickets, so that if they're really of limited means, aren't we all? But we've got a ticket where you can save about 25% on the ticket price. And we also have the opportunity to live stream so that you can effectively see what's going on, but you can join in as well by primarily Twitter. There will be panel discussions. We're not going to duck from any issue. We've got a sex abuse specialist coming as well, Dave Pittman from an organisation called Together We Heal. So we're not going to shy away from things that people don't talk about. And there'll be more frothy stuff as well, because we want to have the funny dad stories. There'll be an opportunity to tell your bit and do your party piece on video. And there's a lot more of surprises, which again I haven't even had time to get to yet. But you can get information. You can get information about that on the website for Birth and Beyond 360, which is www.birthandbeyondmagazine.com. I have a blog on there. You're welcome. You can contact me anytime. The contact details you'll see on the right-hand button bar of the website. And if you have ideas, if you have stories about amazing fathers who you think should be acknowledged, I would love you to join in. I want to get as many different dad butts on those seats as possible. And let's just bust this out so that the companies and Washington will listen, and so there can be proper support for dads and families throughout the country.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time today to I know you're a busy guy, to sit down with us and talk. And just so all you listeners know, really do contact Jim. That's what I did, and this is where we are now. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
He's very available, and so don't be afraid to reach out and email him if you know of something, or if you just want to connect and you're hired. So
please do.
All right, Jim. Okay. I think we'll wrap it up. Is there any thoughts that you want to?
At some stage, I'm looking forward to meeting you guys and bringing your community in, because fitness is very it's a subject very close to my heart, and we need to keep ourselves in shape in order to bring these little ones up. The more energy we have, the better job we do. So good work for what you're doing, and you've got my absolute support, and I got your back.
All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jim. And,
okay. Thank you.
Talk soon. Appreciate it.
Will do. Thanks again.
All right. Bye.